Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 39. Today we're getting our whitetail reports from Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, so stay tuned. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And this installment of the DIY report number 3. We have some folks coming to us from Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, so looking forward to get their updates. And today is, I guess it is November 2nd, if you guys are listening to this, or at least November 2nd is when this will be launched. So it is finally here, that time of year we all kind of look forward to. It's like whitetail Christmas. The beginning of November is here, which means things should be heating up in your neck of the woods if they haven't already started. And we'll, of course, get that report from those folks coming up here in just a couple minutes. As you're listening to this, I'll likely be on my way to Ohio. I do my yearly Ohio trip. Well, this will be the second year that I've gone to go out and hunt some public land. Had a great year last year, killed a great deer. Hoping to do that again this year. This year, I think, is going to be possibly a little bit more challenging. The area that I'll be hunting doesn't have quite the deer density that you look for, or that you would maybe want to see in terms of getting run over with deer, but it certainly has the age structure to grow some really nice deer. So looking forward to this upcoming hunt, and I'll be on my way there as you guys are listening to this. One piece of housekeeping before we dive into our DIY report. The next podcast that we release, which will be episode number 40, we'll be doing with Buddy Pyland from Ozonics. Ozonics, for those of you that don't know, creates an ozone machine, or developed an ozone machine that you can actually take into the tree with you. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it. Buddy comes on. We're going to talk a little bit about his western hunt, some whitetail hunting, his elk hunt, a little bit about Ozonics, the fact that Pennsylvania now has made it legal to use Ozonics in the tree. If you don't know, that is the case, and it should be rolling out officially to make it officially legal sometime in mid to later November, at least from the press release that I read by the Pennsylvania Game and Fish, or the Pennsylvania Game Commission. But also you'll want to pay attention to that episode, because we are going to be giving away an Ozonics unit to listeners of episode number 40, and the details for how to enter into that giveaway will be part of that podcast. So make sure you tune into that. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get cranking with this week's DIY report. DIY report is coming to you by way of the Hoosier State, Indiana, brought to us by Jesse Lipscomb. I did not butcher your last name this time, so I think we're off to a good start. How's it going, man?
It's going good. How are you doing?
Good, man. Hey, first things first, I want to congratulate you on a great October buck. I saw some pictures on Facebook here. I think it was a week or so ago. So that's a great looking deer, man.
Yes, sir. It was actually on the 26th. He taped out at 165 and 4/8. He was definitely my best bow buck to date. He's definitely a dandy. Yeah, man. That's I definitely wouldn't be passing those up in the timber too often. But hey, I want to thank you for hopping on here and taking some time to go through, giving us an update of what's happening in the Hoosier State. So let's just, I guess, start off with what up until that point, or even on that particular hunt, aside from that buck, what kind of activity are you seeing in terms of deer movement? Are you seeing some daylight movement? Are you seeing any chasing that's starting to happen? Yeah, I've actually been seeing quite a few deer movement, more in the evening than I have been in the morning. So I kind of just kept out of my stands in the mornings. But that on the 26th, I decided to head into the stand and give it a shot that morning. And sure enough, it paid off. He came out in the field. I actually didn't even see him at first. I seen a doe. Then I heard some snort wheeze. I was like, man, that's getting my blood pumping. So just kind of grunted a few times at him, and he popped up over the hill that was in the field and started chasing the doe. And been seeing a lot of chasing. Been seeing some scrapes pop up on the edges.
Nice. Now, is that chasing? Is that
had the deer?
I'm sorry. Is that chasing typical for this time of the year for you? Is this earlier than you usually see it, or is this about right?
It usually kicks in about the last week of October to the first week of November is usually when we start to see it. It usually, the best time to see chasing and fighting is usually around the 10th of November. So it's a little early to see this much rut activity. I think the cold front that we had come through has definitely heated things up a little bit.
Yeah, and it might be some of this warm weather that we've had too, kind of suppressing things. So whenever they get the opportunity to get cranking, maybe they just kind of go full tilt during those times. Might be some of it too. So, I know you're talking about seeing some activity and stuff. Are you, as far as scrapes are concerned and stuff like that, are those really kind of heating up at this time, or are they? I imagine they're not going cold quite yet.
No, they're actually heating up. I actually found some fresh scrapes today that morning that I harvested my buck that I haven't seen before, so they're definitely starting to hit the scrapes more often. I've actually started to see a lot more rubs as well. I've been finding a lot of good scrape lines, more on the edge of the fields than anything. So I think it's kind of more to see what does are in for the bucks. I have been seeing some in the edges of the woods a little bit off of the fields, but I haven't quite seen any back in the deep timbers as much, but definitely nice on the edge of the field.
Nice. Those are all good signs pointing in the right direction to the time we all kind of look forward to here in the next couple of weeks. But I know you mentioned that you heard some snort wheeze in here whenever you killed this buck there on the 26th. Are there any calls particular that you found that were working this time of year for you, aside from of course that fellow that was giving you some auditory excitement?
That was actually the only time I've ever heard a snort wheeze, so I thought it was, at first I wasn't even sure what it was, and then it kind of came into my mind. I was like, I'm pretty sure that was a snort wheeze, so I gave some grunts back, and sure enough, and actually that buck started chasing the doe that was in the field, and another buck came out in the field and actually grunted at him, and the buck that I was able to harvest turned around and actually chased him out of the field, and then went right back to actually snort wheezed one more time, and then started chasing that doe again. And it's pretty exciting actually being able to experience something like that. It's the first time for me, and I've hunted since I was 11 years old, and I'm going on to 25 now. So
right, yes, yeah,
never know what to expect.
That's right, man. The timber's always full of excitement and some things that you may have not encountered. Just about every sit, I think you run into something that you didn't see before. So it does sound like, in your neck of the woods, at least, that calls or using, calls, whether it's grunting or maybe a little rattling or whatever, might actually be the starting to heat up to where those things might start to work a little bit more than they had in weeks previous.
Absolutely.
So how about the weather, man? Like what have you been running into out there thus far? I know you mentioned you had a little bit of a cold front there the day you aired that buck, but what do you see as far as like fronts coming up here? Does the weather look good here in like the next week or so, or are we kind of getting back into the warmer temperatures?
I think it's looking pretty good. I think I checked the forecast earlier today, and it's supposed to be around the 40-degree temperature. I'm thinking it's really going to keep the bucks moving and on their feet, as well as the does. I think it's going to help them stay in the position that they need to be in order for us to see more bucks on their feet out looking for cruising for does. I think it's really going to play a good role, and I think it's actually going to be one of the better ruts that Indiana has seen in a few years with this weather, because usually this time of year it's still fairly warm, usually high 60s to low 70s, but it's dropping down in the 40s and 30s this next week. I think it's really going to get some deer on their feet.
Nice. I think all the folks from Indiana that are listening to this are liking your forecast there for the rut this year. Hopefully it plays out. That's for sure. But I know you'd mentioned that you were seeing some scrapes and stuff there along the field edges and so forth. So in your neck of the woods, what type of food sources are still in play here? I mean, are these cut corn fields, bean fields? Do you have some good acorn crop this year? So what's the story with food?
Most of the fields have been harvested. There's still a couple bean fields that haven't been cut. Majority of the corn has already been shelled out, and them fields are cut. The fields I was actually hunting, there was a CRP field where my stand's at, and then there's a bean field on the north side of it, and then a clover field right beside it. Most of the scrapes I've been seeing has actually been in the cut bean fields. I haven't really been in the deep woods this year to check the acorns, but as far as the crops, I would lean more toward a bean field right now as I would a cornfield.
Right. So for this time of year, man, as far as like tactics and strategies that you like to use, is there a particular stand location, that you particularly like to get on this time of year? I know you mentioned you hadn't got a chance really to get into the deep timber, and of course we're lucky enough to get an arrow and a nice buck. So you might have had a limited number of sits, but what's usually your game plan for this time of year when we get here to the last week of October, heading into the first week of November?
This time of year, when the rut's starting to kick on, I usually try to put most of my hunts to where I can see a lot of areas, so majority of fields. That way, bucks come out and check the does, and you'll be able to have an eye on them a lot better than you would in thick timber. Or also, I'll find a big ravine or gully that I can see down quite a ways to check bucks crossing. I try to keep this time of year to where I have a high visibility of where I'm setting.
Nice. So that big question is, I'm not familiar with Indiana. Is it a 1-buck state? So are you tagged out for the year this year?
Yes, sir. It's you can only kill 1 buck. You can actually, if you have access to a military base on Indiana, you can buy what is called a military refuge license, and you are actually able to harvest another buck on the military base if you buy that refuge license. But just the state license itself is just 1 buck per person per year.
Right. So you'll be spending some time scouting this year for the rest of the season, I imagine. Maybe a little bit of a doe hunt and get some meat in the freezer.
Yes, sir. She's got a pregnant wife that's 8 months along. She's wanting to try to tag a deer this year before the baby comes along in December, so I'm going to focus on that.
There you go. Congratulations, man. That's you got it done just in time. That way you can wrap up your honey-do list before the little package comes.
Absolutely.
That's right, man. Hey, man, I appreciate you coming on, buddy. Good luck to you the rest of this year. Good luck to your wife, and congrats on the upcoming kiddo.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
All right, take care, man. All right, reporter number 2 is a buddy of mine, Jay Rodney. We've been talking for what it feels like, for years now online. He comes to us from PA bow hunting and is reporting from my home state, the Keystone State, Pennsylvania. So how's it going, man?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. Glad to finally get in touch with you.
Yeah, I know, man. It's like I said, feels like we've been chatting on and off for a couple years and kicking around different ideas. I think a lot of them kind of rally around the idea of habitat management, because I know that you're real into kind of, that approach in conservation and stuff like that. And I think that's where our initial conversation started.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah. So, hey, I first off, let me say thanks for hopping on and doing this. I want to get a sense. I know, I live in Pennsylvania, of course, but we live in different sections of PA. And just truth be told,
right.
With what I had going on at the earlier part of the year of being fortunate enough to wrap my tag around a buck, I haven't had a lot of opportunity to kind of get back out in the timber. The honey-do list kind of grew once that happened. So I've been being a good whitetail hunter and trying to get that taken care of so I can take my rutcation. So I wanted to call someone who I know has been active and out in the timber to give us an update of what's happening in Pennsylvania. So let's start off with buck activity. Are you seeing at this point, any daytime movement or chasing that you would attribute to kind of the rut getting cranked up?
I'll tell you, it's been a really odd year so far this year. The only buck I've seen during the day is on camera. So I haven't seen any as I'm in stand. Now, last light, I caught a glimpse of a few, but it was just a little on the dark side. So it's strange though. I'll be in one spot and not see any movement, and then 5 miles away, a buddy's telling me he's seeing them running all over the place.
Yeah, that's kind of wild.
It's really it really is kind of standing me on my head a little bit this year so far.
Yeah, I hear you. It's I can say at least the time I was able to spend in the stand this year, I didn't see a whole lot of movement. Of course, this was earlier in the year. Now, I had checked in with a buddy of mine who was hunting a couple different pieces of public land over this weekend, and he did start to see movement. Now, nothing, in terms of maturity. They were all still relatively younger.
Right.
I think he said he saw 2 shooters, but he said they definitely were nosing around some does. 2 different instances. He hunted 2 different sections, which he thought was kind of weird or kind of wild, where he was in one section, saw a younger buck kind of nosing a doe around, harassing her, and then he went to another, piece of ground that was, it was probably 20, 30 miles away, and he saw the exact same thing happen, which is kind of wild, because I know what you're saying. A lot of times this stuff is kind of localized, it seems like, that I've run into too. Now, as far as like scrapes and stuff like that, are those still kind of heating up? Are you seeing a lot of activity? Do you have some cameras hung on scrapes? You getting any action there?
Oh yeah, man, they really are. Which is, I mean, they've been going for a good 2 weeks now, if not a little longer. Just in my experience, which with the warm weather, wasn't sure how they were going to react to that. But I'm talking to a lot of friends who are out hunting, even more so than I am. And they're like, I go into my spot and I see, 3 or 4 more new scrapes in these certain areas. And it gets pretty excited when you start seeing that kind of activity, So it's going to have to happen sometime. They're going to have to breed soon. So it's whether or not we're going to be able to catch them during shooting hours. That's going to be the trick, honestly.
Yeah, I know. I was looking at the forecast here coming up, and I know, as I mentioned, I'm getting ready to go take my trip to Ohio, and the one thing I was looking at was the rain. And a lot of times, I don't mind, hunting the rain, especially if it's a steady little bit of rain with a temp drop is a lot of times nice. It gets the deer moving a little bit. And the other thing I like about it though is a lot of times is that if you get just enough rain, that kind of, I don't want to say sanitizes those scrapes, where it's like those bucks kind of have to come back around, check them, and refresh them. So that's one of the other things,
absolutely.
To kind of look out for is, especially this time of year before the rut in chasing really kind of kicks up, where those scrapes can be kind of a gold mine to a degree. It's like, look at those, days right after a good rain where they're going to have to, hit that scrape line to freshen it back up. But, so this, I want to get a sense, because one of the fellows I talked to, coming from Indiana, he's seeing all kinds of calling that's working right now. The bucks are being pretty vocal out in the Hoosier state. So what are you seeing from your perspective? Is there anything that's working right now in terms of calling? Is it grunting, snort wheezing, rattling, anything like that?
Now, me personally, no. I haven't. I really only did a little bit of rattling and a little bit of grunting the last time I was out. It was the only good day that it dropped down into the high 30s back up last Thursday, so we had a really good day for it. So I'm like, I dropped everything and got in the stand.
Nice.
But we've had 50, 60 degree weather all the time.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit, I was like, man, I'm not going to miss this. And so that was that was the last time I saw some actual buck activity. But I have, friends of mine who are in the same area are saying there's deer running in the fields grunting, they're coming to the rattle. So it's definitely working. Maybe not so much for myself, but, it's definitely that time. It's starting to really kick up the pre-rut activity now. So they're getting a lot more active. I just, it's unfortunately the warm weather's keeping them a little bit more nocturnal, I think.
Right.
But it's going to have to break sooner or later. It's going to have to break. So
yeah, it does. It's just a matter of if we're in the correct stands or not whenever they break.
That's it. That's the trick. It's rolling the dice.
Yeah. Speaking of those weather fronts, man, what's the weather looking like for you in your neck of the woods of PA for the next week or so? Is the weather looking like, are you going to get any decent weather, or is it warming back up completely? What's the story there?
It's all over the map again. I mean, we have temperatures as low as, 49 to 51, that area, right back up to 64. It's going to be wet for about 4 or 5 days next week. So it's going to be pick and choose, try and get out when you can. But I think maybe it's going to be the very end of the season that we're going to be able to really hit it hard, because it's finally going to cool down and get into the 40s and stuff like that. So, I hate to focus so much on weather, but man, it's been a bit of an Achilles heel for us lately, especially up here in the Northeast.
Yeah, I hear that, man.
But
it's been that way. It's been that way around here too. It's just I kind of got lucky on the roll of the dice with mine. That first opening Saturday was really good with that cold front that came through, and I saw some good deer that day. But it really has, man. It's been kind of a crapshoot. Which last year the weather I feel like was pretty good. It was the year before that the weather was really, really warm. So I guess we can't have it the best all the time. I guess we have to take what we get and try to make do with it. But
indeed, man, yeah. I mean, our first day was probably the most deer activity I saw. Was on first day. I had my 9-year-old out for the mentored youth hunt with the crossbow action, and it was good to see him see deer. Nothing close enough to shoot at, but that was probably the most deer I saw all season so far. Was first day.
I hear you. Now, what about food sources? How are they playing a role this time of year still? Like, what's attractive in your neck of the woods? I know for me, I had a ton of acorns where I typically hunt. So that, and with the warm weather, even in the timber, all their normal browse is still kind of a viable option for them. What's it look like where you're at?
Well, same thing. We got a lot of hard mast up in our area, and it's been kind of consistent. It's not like it all fell at one time. It's been spreading out. And again, we still have green trees here in certain areas. Yeah. So, it's kind of spreading itself out. We have, we actively use food plots. A friend of mine has a food plot seed company, and we use a lot of his stuff, and they have been hitting that pretty hard. The thing is, there's so much else in the woods for them to hit, like the crab apples and the chestnuts. All that stuff is still out there, so they're not so dependent on our food sources that we're providing for them. So it's kind of hit or miss, unfortunately, but it's a lot of the travel areas is what I've been focusing on, between their bedding and where they like to go feed. So that's where I've been focusing stands right now.
Nice.
Lately.
Nice. So that actually was a nice segue into the next question. Was just, I'm curious this time of year, what you're looking for in terms of, or what tactics or strategies you like to employ this time of year. You just mentioned you like to kind of focus on travel corridors for your stand locations. Is there anything else that you really kind of like to key in on this time of year?
Well, now that we're getting into a little bit more action, I'll kind of move into some different funnels that I usually don't see much deer activity in the early season, but you'll start to see it when the bucks are starting to chase and they're starting to move around a lot more. They kind of start to get a lot more active in those areas. Food sources, where the doe are going to be, the bucks are going to be. So I'll move a little closer sometimes to some food sources, some food plots, and hunt like the very edge of the plots. Numerous times I've sat back a little bit and I sat there all night watching the deer run around the edge of the food plot. So I kind of learned to adjust my tactics a little bit and get a little closer to the open areas where they like to run around a little bit. Right. But food's good to have. If you're fortunate. I mean, a lot of guys, there's spots that I hunt at state land, and you just strictly have to hunt funnels. I mean, You find the best spot where you're seeing a lot of activity and where they have to travel through, whether it be rock pilings or ledges or benches, something of that nature. And it's really you're going to increase your odds of seeing deer activity, when they have to travel in a certain direction. So, that's right. But I'm fortunate enough to hunt some private land where we actually can put some food plots in and stuff like that. So I like to kind of concentrate on the food, right, best I can.
Yeah, that's the name of the game, man. You got to try to be where the deer are. I always say you can't kill them if you can't see them. So, thanks for jumping on here, man. Thanks for giving me the update for PA. Good luck to you the rest of the year. Good luck to the fellows over at the Pennsylvania or PA bow hunting. Tell those guys I said good luck. And
will do, man. Will do.
And I'll check in with you again soon.
Absolutely, look forward to it, man. Hey, good luck to you guys. Everybody else out there, have a great season.
All right, thanks, man.
Stay safe, guys. All right, thanks a lot.
All right, our third reporter coming to us from the great state of Michigan, my buddy Kevin Vistisen, coming to us from the Deer Hunter podcast. How's it going, my man?
Excellent, Clint. You having a good evening?
Oh man, if it got any better, I'd probably have to share. I think.
Really? Oh, that good?
Man, that good. Deer hunting, the rut is nearly upon us here, getting ready for the trip. We were just kind of talking about offline that we've talking about our plans here over the course of the next couple of weeks, so pretty pumped for that, man.
Well, I just finished eating 2 ridiculously large servings of venison pot roast, so.
You are winning currently. I did not have venison pot roast. I have a lot of venison prepared for the trip, but my venison eating took place on Saturday. But now you're making me hungry.
I'll tell you what, I'd be doing your listeners an injustice by not telling them how simple of a recipe this is that I just made, and it's like you can't stop eating it. If I hadn't had to get on the phone with you, I'd be sitting down there still eating it. And you just take a big venison roast and throw it in a crock pot. Your potatoes, your carrots, your celery, your onions, mushrooms, whatever you like in your roast, and then a bottle of your favorite Bloody Mary mix, and just pour that in there and close that and cook it, and it's amazing.
Bam, right there. People tuning in didn't know that you were also getting the Food Network venison cooking channel here with Kevin Vistisen.
I prefer the Zing Zang Bloody Mary mix over the rest of them. It's a little saltier.
Yeah, the Zing Zang is good, man. I used to use that whenever back in my bartending days.
I'm telling you, it's hard to beat. So, just a bottle of Zing Zang in there, and I put a little smoked sea salt too, because I like it good and salty.
Well, now you're fancy. Now you're just showing off.
It's not that fancy. It's like $1.99. You can
right.
probably get it at the dollar store.
Right. But what you can't get at the dollar store is buck activity and buck activity detail and a report on what's happening in Michigan. And that's what Kevin's going to give to us today. So to get this thing cranking, man, what are you seeing? I know you'd recently been out, and we were just kind of talking about some of the perils of hunting recently. But what are you seeing as far as deer activity? Are you seeing any daylight movement? Are you seeing any chasing yet, yourself? Or do you have any buddies that are kind of reporting what they've been seeing?
So I'll give you what I'm seeing right now, and then basically historically what I see this time of year and what's to come here in the next couple weeks, and then we'll break it down even a little bit further. I think it's probably necessary to break it down from southern Michigan to northern Michigan because I see a little time difference in this activity and the way that it happens yearly. So
yeah, let's do it.
So in southern Michigan right now, where I'm hunting, I haven't had much time to hunt mornings just because of obviously work during the week, but the cameras are saying that deer are on their feet in the mornings. Some cameras that I've pulled cards on, 75% of the photos are from 7 to 10 o'clock in the morning, bucks and does just on their feet in the mornings, whereas even 10 days ago that was not the case. So right. I would say that's a pretty good precursor for, it's starting to pop right now.
Nice.
Big mature deer, I would say it's still going to be another week. It depends on where you're at, right? So if you have access to a property that's a good property with real low pressure and good deer numbers, it's probably happening right now. But if you're hunting public or smaller parcels that get a lot of pressure, those big mature deer are still not moving during daylight. If you're going to hunt those deer, you're going to have to get in on the doorstep of their bedrooms and hope that you can get in there quiet enough where they slip up and make a mistake. They are getting up and out of their bedrooms that 5 to 10 minutes before daylight now, but they're not going far from them, and they don't, and they won't until, there's a lovely lady that's basically dragging them out of there. And right. That's not yet. I think there's probably, you still got a good week to 10 days before that's the case. But the 2-year-olds and the 1-year-olds are running all over the place right now, and the does are starting to get harassed. Mm-hmm. Deer are checking scrapes daily. So the activity in general is up a lot here in southern Michigan, but unless you're, like I said, have access to a property that has real good buck to doe ratio, where there's maybe a couple mature bucks in the area where they do have to be a little bit more competitive. For the most part, I'd say we're still a week out from the beginning of the best of the year.
Right. So is that holding true for north, or are you seeing something a little bit different up there?
So historically, and I can't speak to exactly what's happening there right now because I haven't been up there in a couple weeks, but historically, it usually seems that things happen there about 5 days to a week earlier. Usually when I'm up there the middle of November, let's say the 15th, because that's our gun opener, it's in full swing. Right. Deer, young bucks are running around like their heads are cut off. 3 and 4-year-olds are cruising around midday. So, and I usually don't see that activity until maybe around the 20th of November here. So I think it's a seasonal thing. They get a lot rougher winters up there. I'm talking 4 hours north of where I am in the metro, Detroit area, basically southern Michigan, southeast Michigan. Mm-hmm. You go up 4 hours north of here, they get a lot more snow. They get a lot harsher winters. So I don't know if it has to do with the seasonal fawn drop in the spring, but the rut just seems to be, a couple days earlier from what I've viewed over the last 20 years of hunting up there.
Right. I was actually going to say that, it feels like that would probably make sense as far as them dropping a little earlier to, for survival purposes. That was originally where my mind went. I know you mentioned scrapes just a second ago, kind of checking scrapes and stuff like that. Are those spots really kind of heating up at this point, or are they, are they still freshening those things up? What's the story with scrapes? Does it seem like a viable option to hunt scrapes right now?
It depends. If you can find them where they're back in thick cover, then you're likely going to see deer during daytime. All the scrapes are getting tore up right now, but most of the field edge stuff and most of the scrapes in general are still nighttime, especially mature deer. The couple bigger deer that I do have on camera, they're still not touching scrapes until, well, an hour after dark.
Interesting.
But if you can find one that's essentially right on the edge of real good bedding, where you think that a good buck could be held up in there, that last 5 or 10 minutes of daylight could prove to be pretty good right now, because that is the first thing that they're doing when they get up and out of their bed is, heading to scrapes, freshening them up, checking them, because every night right now, every one that I know of is getting tore up by multiple deer, but not very much of it's happening during the day. And, a lot of younger bucks in the morning and in the evening versus the mature deer still doing it under the cover of darkness. So
right, that's been pretty consistent with what I've heard for some other folks. Is just the young guys are starting to get cranked up right now, not quite sure what's going on, trying to figure out what's going on might be a better way to put it.
Right,
and have been the ones they've been seeing more during daylight. I think you're right, where the old wily veterans know that the game isn't quite started yet. So they're not going to waste their energy.
I would say my advice to anybody that's looking to hunt scrapes right now in southern Michigan would be that see where that scrape is, try to look on a bigger scale of if it's at a travel corridor to and from somewhere, and then where is the nastiest, thickest spot in proximity to that where you don't think other guys are willing to go. And that's probably where those deer are coming in and out of while it's actually shooting time to get to those places to make those scrapes.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I think it's good advice is, trying to figure out where those spots are, those adjacent areas where they're going to find cover during the course of the day, and try to catch them as they're slipping out. What are you using any calls this time of year, or do you have any buddies who you've been kind of talking to in Michigan that are using calls? And if so, does anything seem to be working right now, or are the calls kind of staying in the bag until here in like another week or so?
So historically, rattling antlers are pretty much out of the question here in the state of Michigan. There's just not a lot of mature deer. I haven't seen much success with it. Mm-hmm. Snort wheeze, the only reaction that I've ever had from a buck here in Michigan snort wheezing is it flagging its tail and running directly away from me. So I don't know how good, but historically I've killed a handful of deer, and I will continue to do that this year, is replicating a 1.5 or a 2.5-year-old tending grunt. Mm-hmm. Which is basically that short burst of grunts with maybe 5 or 10 seconds in between when they're in pursuit and harassing a doe. Right. And basically from Halloween all the way through till around Thanksgiving time, mm-hmm. that call has proven to be pretty efficient for me. Sometimes it's tempting to overdo it because I have had good results with that. And, if you have a deer that's bedded in proximity to you and he hears that thing going off, handful of times throughout a couple hours, I think they're pretty savvy to that. It's just something that when I'm out there on a sit, if I'm out there for 3 or 4 hours, I'm right, like let's use the morning, for instance, as soon as the sun comes up and I think there might be some deer working through the area or that have been bedded down before daylight even, I'll give that call just a couple tending grunts to let a deer know that could potentially be bedded in proximity to hearing me that, hey, something's going on over here. When that deer does decide mid-morning to get up out of his bed, he may work over to that way to scent check to see what was going on. Was that young buck actually pursuing a hot doe and, know which direction they're going in? I've had real good results doing that throughout my hunting career. I've probably killed 6 or 8 bucks, that have ran in on that call. So, but that's basically about the only one here for me personally that I've ever had success with, is just mimicking a young tending grunt, and use it very sparingly. Like I said, 1 or 2 times when you're out there. If you sit out there the whole time and blow that thing like you're duck hunting, you can forget it.
Yeah.
You're just letting them know where you are.
Yeah, exactly. I have similar results and experience here in Pennsylvania as far as rattling. I don't rattle. I snort wheezed once, and that was just to clear a field, to clear a deer out of a field so I could get out of my stand at one point. I guess it was like 2 years ago. Other than that, I don't do it. I do use a similar grunt because it does seem to work here. It's not as obtrusive, I guess, or as intimidating, I guess, if you will. The word it kind of piques more curiosity than it does anything. So
right.
I kind of take a similar approach. What about the weather right now for you guys? I know the weather this year, especially in October, was really just kind of hit and miss. There was one or two decent cold fronts that came through, but they didn't last very long. And most part, we were seeing some warmer temperatures. It seems like the weather, at least around here, and then I know even when I looked at Ohio, it's going to start changing a little bit here in like the next week or so. But what's the weather been like for you, and where's it kind of headed here in like the next week?
Right now, it's awesome. I mean, it's setting up to be perfect. I mean, we've got Halloween tomorrow, and we've got cold temperatures. I mean, we're touching high 30s at night and 40s during the day. Some overcast. The only thing that's been a little odd, I know we had those real warm temperatures, and to be honest with you, I was so busy I didn't do much deer hunting. In combination of, one, I was saving my chips for the month of November and really was just trying to stay out of my spots on what I would deem a low percentage opportunity of going out when it's 70, 75 degrees.
Right.
So now is like, it's setting up to be perfect. Drop in temperatures, a lot of moisture in the air. I think mature deer very much prefer to move on overcast, rainy days. They very much identify that the nastier the weather is, the less they just hear people out and about, the less they smell people, and they're more comfortable moving. So I would say if we get, a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind and some rain, I mean, it can't just be pouring down rain because that just makes it miserable. But
right.
if there's enough rain where it's like going to keep people out of the woods, those are the days to go.
Yeah, I agree, man. I always kind of look forward to those days. I don't mind. Like, I'm kind of like you, man. I don't want to necessarily sit in a driving rainstorm, but I don't mind a nice steady rain during the course of the day, or even intermittent rain, because I kind of agree. It keeps people out of the woods. Number one is what I kind of look for. Is keep some of the fair weather hunters at home and cozy in bed while I can kind of get out. And of course, like you mentioned, there's less smell in the woods. And the only challenge is it's a little quieter, which means you just kind of have to be more on high alert.
Yes.
I can't get my tree stand nap in like I like to, sometimes late afternoon, which is a little bit of a bummer, but we'll make do. The other thing I wanted to ask you, man, is what type of food sources do you still have in play in Michigan right now? I mean, I'm assuming a lot of the crops have been pulled out of the ag fields, but do you have a pretty decent hard mass drop this year, or what's that looking like?
Yeah, for the spots that I've seen, there's been acorns everywhere. I mean, right now, I was out tonight and I was really noticing, I don't know if it's the warm temperatures or what the cause is, but it almost looks like foliage-wise in the woods that we're mid-October right now. Mm-hmm. It does not look like we're about to turn the calendar to November. There is still a lot of foliage, and deer are still very much just on woody browse. Any immature forest or real brushy areas, the deer are just, they can hold up in there and pick at that stuff. They don't really have to rely yet on destination food sources. There's still quite a bit of corn up. I've seen it come down in some places, but I'd say there's probably more standing corn than there is corn down, which can add to the difficulty, obviously. The beans are all brown. They're not really messing with those. So it's hard. There's acorns everywhere, and there's still a lot of foliage. Some stuff even just looks like lush and green. It's hardly even turned color yet. So
yeah,
I know the deer are very much still, and that's that's, I think, like 60% of their diet anyways is that stuff naturally. So
yeah, I mean, it definitely makes it difficult, right? Whenever they're not having to hit a destination food source yet at this point, and they have plenty of food in the timber. They become pretty difficult to hunt because now they don't have to leave bedding, or very far from bedding to get food, so which makes it kind of, that much more important to set up on bedding, or at least close to bedding, especially the more mature deer that you're talking about, the less likely he is to travel far from home to get food in his belly if it's readily available. What speaking of, just kind of setting up on those particular spots, whenever there's abundance of food, what kind of tactics or strategies are you looking to use this time of year? Do you have particular kind of, I guess, terrain features that you're looking for, or particular stand locations that you kind of seek out during this time of the year?
Yeah, and it touches on what we were just talking about, food sources, and then it plays a part in strategy the way that I hunt too. And, I don't know in PA if you guys can legally bait.
No, can't.
So in Michigan, you can bait, and a high percentage of deer hunters, that's how they do it. If you want to kill a doe or you want to kill a young buck, it's a extremely efficient way. If you want to kill a mature deer, the best way you can stack the odds against you is to go sit over bait.
Right.
But the mature deer know where every single one of those bait piles are. So they will sit tight until it's dark, an hour after dark, and they know, and they've listened to everybody walk out of the woods and the car doors close and the cars drive away. And if you have a camera over those bait piles, from 10 o'clock to all throughout the night, you'll get mature deer on those bait piles. And it's two reasons. One, they'll come in there and just stuff their faces. They'll eat piles of carrots and apples and corn. And these bait piles, I mean, there's so many people hunting in the state of Michigan. I mean, you could have, a square mile, you could have a dozen bait piles, and these deer know where all these are. So they'll go load up on those, and one, they will get a full stomach, and two, they will go there as a hub for deer communication, because all the other deer in those areas are coming in and out of there as well, and they will locate and, pinpoint who's coming in and out of here. And if there's a hot doe, well, then they know which direction they're going. So that also makes it, really hard when you're trying to hunt over like a primary food source, because a lot of the deer traffic, you just never know. You could walk a real far ways out into the woods where you don't think anybody would be willing to go. And what do you know? There's a ladder stand and a bait pile. So it can add levels of complication to it. But what I found is, a lot of times identifying other people's bait piles, and mature bucks will 70 yards to 100 yards downwind of those, they will cruise those, because they will do that to try to, from essentially like the end of October through November, they will do that, on the downwind side, identifying who's in there. Is there a hot doe in there? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Is there reason to stay here and be interested in this?
Right.
And I've had a lot of success setting up 70 to 100 yards off of someone else's bait pile on the downwind side on the edge of bedding and seeing deer.
Nice. I like that idea, man. You're using their pressure as your benefit, essentially. Yeah. They're going to move the deer to a certain place, one by their pressure, and two by their curiosity to see what's checking those bait piles. And knowing that, you're able to kind of set up to take advantage of it. I like that approach. It's cool.
Yeah, and you can replicate that yourself as well too. And I have. I'm not a huge, hunt over bait. Let's say late muzzleloader season that I need to put a deer in the freezer. Mm-hmm. I'm not ashamed to go out and throw, a small bucket of corn out and come back 3 days later and, right. sit in proximity to it. Especially if you're hunting big woods, right. It's a surefire way to shoot a deer. And if you have, if you're working and you have, 2 days on the weekend to get a deer, it's a good way to get it done. But for mature deer, what I've found to be pretty useful is to imply that tactic, but hunt 70 to 100 yards on the downwind side of that, somewhere in cover where you suspect a more mature deer would be willing to be comfortable traveling, and what he's doing is essentially scent checking who's going in and out of that bait. And I killed a deer in that manner a couple of years ago. Actually, probably my biggest northern Michigan buck to date. So
nice
implementing that.
I like it, man. Well, hey, dude, thanks for giving us a report on Michigan and all things Michigan hunting for the for this week. I appreciate you taking the time to jump on here. And it's always good to catch up with you talking deer hunting, man. We need to do it more often.
I know. Sounds good, Clint.
All right,
I
man.
enjoyed it.
Good luck in your hunt here going up north, and let's connect afterwards. I want to get a full report.
Sounds good.
All right, brother. You take care.
Okay, you too, buddy.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. Just want to thank all of you for tuning in, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to keep up with this season's whitetail excursions. I'll, of course, try to post as much as I can while I'm in Ohio, as much as cell service will allow me. And then also good luck to all of you who are currently in the deer woods. Before we shut this thing down, I want to thank our partners for helping us keep this podcast going. So a big thank you to Whitetail Institute of North America, Excess Outdoor Gear, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
November's on my heels, makes me proud, makes me steal. I could show you through the door, I ain't welcome anymore. A long time coming, if it all, it takes a special knowing to color for damaged heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I